Hi, my name is Nguyen, and I'm an origami artist and designer. Today I'm going to show you how to create your very own origami garment by pleating fabric. It'll look somewhat similar to this top, except it'll be one size fits all and won't necessarily require any sewing. For this project, you will need some fabric, scissors, paper, an iron or an oven, and possibly some masking tape. Optional supplies that aren't strictly necessary but may come in handy include a sewing machine and thread, binder clips, cooking twine or string, and clear nail polish. Step 1 is to choose the right kind of fabric. It has to be a synthetic fiber so that it will pleat properly. I've had success with both polyester and nylon. Something that is somewhat stiff and behaves similarly to paper will be able to hold a fold well. So these garments here are made out of polyester taffeta. I've also had some success working with lame, and if you want something that's a bit more sheer, then you can also use organza, and that works really well as well. Fabrics that are softer, like knits, don't work so well, so you can see this fabric is super floppy. If I lift up one layer of fabric here, the corner just flops over like that. It's not able to stay up on its own. Whereas if I take the organza and I lift up one layer of the fabric here, you can see that it's able to, the corner of the fabric here is able to just stay upright without flopping over the way the knit was behaving. The fabric I'll be using today is actually a nylon of some sort. I'm not exactly sure the name of this fabric, but I suspect that it's used for raincoats or tents or something of the like, and it's very stiff. It even sounds a bit like paper when you sort of like crumple it or shake it. So choose the right fabric. Step 2 is to cut the fabric to the right size. How much fabric you need is going to depend on the type of garment you want to make. This is already cut to a 30 by 30 inch square. And I'm going for something that's kind of like a capelet, so it'll be like roughly this length when I'm through. If you want something smaller that's just sort of like a decorative collar, then you'll need less fabric. And if you want something larger, like a poncho or maybe even a full-length caftan, then you'll need more fabric for that. But for my capelet, I'm just sticking with a 30 by 30 inch square. So once you have your square or your rectangle cut out, then you'll need to cut out a hole for the neck. The easiest way I think to do that is to fold it in half twice. So this is once, and this is twice. And then if I cut off this corner is the center of the fabric, and that'll be the hole for the neck. So I'm going to measure about 4 inches from the corner in both directions, and then cut a curve, and that'll be enough space for me to flop it over my head and fit around my neck. How large of a hole you cut here will determine how wide your neck is. So if you want a wider neck, cut a bigger hole. If you want a tighter neckline, cut a smaller hole. So now I've cut a hole out for my head, and it's good to try it on. Make sure that it fits and is the right size that you want. And once you're happy with the dimensions of your cut, you can move on to the next step. Step 3 is entirely optional, but if you'd like, you can hem the edge of your fabric using a sewing machine, if you have one. If you're working with a fabric that frays very easily, then it's a good idea to finish the edge in some fashion. I've read online somewhere, although haven't actually tried it myself, that if you paint the edge of your fabric in clear nail polish, that will also help to keep it from fraying. And that's an option that you can do if you don't have a sewing machine and thread, or don't want to hand sew it. What I actually did here was I cut my fabric with a hot knife, and so that actually seals the edge of my fabric by basically melting it. So moving on to step 4, we now have to create the fabric mold. So I'm just going to take this piece of fabric here and set it off to the side for now while we create the mold. To do that, you'll need a sheet of paper that's twice as big as the piece of fabric you cut. So my fabric was 30 by 30, and so I'm going to keep one of the dimensions as 30, and then the other dimension I'm going to double it. So I need something that's 30 by 60. I have this roll of craft paper here that's 30 inches long, and so I'm going to cut 60 inches from it. If you don't have access to large paper like this, then you can just use standard copy paper, and that'll be fine. So printer paper like this will work just fine, and you'll want to tape multiple sheets of paper together using masking tape. It's important to use a paper-based tape, like masking tape, rather than a plastic tape, because plastic will melt when you heat it either under an iron or in the oven, but paper tape won't. So use a paper tape, and you can tape multiple sheets together to get as large of a sheet of paper as you need. For this next part, I'm going to fold it at a smaller scale because I can get a better camera angle this way. We can pretend that this rectangle I'm creating is 30 by 60 inches. If you're new to origami, I recommend doing some test folds on smaller paper anyway, before tackling the larger mold. So I'm going to start by folding the rectangle in half so that it's the size of my fabric. There will be 2 layers of paper. One part will be the upper half of the mold, and the bottom layer will be the bottom part of the mold. The fabric will eventually go in between these 2 layers, like a sandwich. When you create your folds, they should go through both layers of paper, and folding them together instead of separately ensures that the top and the bottom molds will fit together. At this point, you can fold any flat foldable origami design into the mold to create a geometric texture for your fabric. The example I'm folding here is called the Miura-ori pattern. I've also heard it referred to as chevron pleating. The slowed down step-by-step instructions for this are linked below, but you can fold a different design in this step if you want to get a different texture. And because we've folded it through 2 layers of paper, we can open it, and we now have 2 halves that will fit perfectly with each other to hold our fabric. Here is my folded mold at actual size, 30 by 30 inches, and now we're going to place the fabric inside of the mold. So to do that, we're going to first flatten it out so that it's mostly flat. And then I'm going to open it and place my fabric inside. Now, if your fabric has any major wrinkles running through it, then it would be a good idea to iron that out before you do this step. But if there are no major wrinkles and just some minor ones, then you can just go straight to putting the fabric in the mold. So once I place the fabric here, I'm going to line it up with that folded seam so that it goes all the way up to that fold on that edge. And then I'm going to close my mold. Don't worry if the edges of your fabric don't line up completely perfectly with the edges of your mold. It should still turn out fine. Once your fabric is inside the mold again, it's time to refold it up into the previous folded configuration. And so you can do that by starting to make sure that every crease is in the correct orientation, and then flattening it up. Now, if you're finding that your fabric has a tendency to sort of shift and slip back and forward as you fold it, then you can use binder clips to hold it in place. And then you're going to go around and clip it so that it goes through all 3 layers. So it should be two layers of paper with 1 layer of fabric in between, and just pick a couple of places to clip it so that it stays put and doesn't shift around too much. You'll want to make sure that the folds of on both sides of the mold actually align with each other when you do the binder clipping. But again, doing this binder clipping isn't strictly necessary. If you're able to do it without binder clipping, that'll probably be a faster process. I find the binder clip method to be useful if I'm doing like a very complicated pattern, but if I'm doing something that's relatively simple, and not too detailed, then I don't really need to use binder clips. I think I can get away without actually binder clipping this entire perimeter. So now I'm just gonna recollapse this pattern. And yeah, I'm gonna lose the clips. You want to make sure that the two parts of the mold are flush with one another and that there's not a ton of space between them, just so that it's really pinching the fabric in the right way. So you can do that before you, like over here, there's a lot of gaps, and so you can just sort of push it down and make sure that it's pinching in the right way. And actually, I'm going to start with this side, because I've collapsed this side and it's now able to be folded flat, and I can pinch this side, and then I'll move my way forward. So I actually will use binder clips here, just to help me out, and I'm going to have it hold on to this side for me temporarily, since that's already set in the mold, as I work my way through getting the other parts of the mold to fold up.